We're super happy to have everybody today. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're so happy to have everybody here. We're going to get started. My name is Mark Bolick. I'm one of the Design Thinkers Group team here in the United States, and I'm also joined by my colleague Ezekiel Williams. We're going to be your moderators for today's webinar. We're planning on going until about 1.5 hours after right now, and we'll have plenty of opportunity for questions and answers and some interactivity in today's webinar. I want to go over the agenda real quickly for everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about the logistics of this webinar in the next slide, and then Arne van Oosterom will do an introduction to the webinar and talk a little bit about the background and the purpose and what you can expect. And then we're going to have 4 panelists, and each panelist will do a short presentation followed by a Q&A round. And then we will repeat that for each of the panelists until the end. And then we'll have a short wrap up of the webinar. At any time, you may submit questions, and we will do our best to scan those questions and respond to them as needed. For example, if we have any technical issues, we'll respond to those immediately. But as I said, there will be a question and answer section after each of the speakers. Feel free to submit questions during the speaker's talk. That's fine, but it's best if you would submit those towards the end. But it's up to you. You can use the Q&A feature in the Zoom application to submit your questions. And to that point, all of the participants, all of the attendees are muted. You will not be able to speak. Feel free to raise your hand, but unfortunately, we will not be able to necessarily respond to that. We will respond to your questions as best we can. As I said, please submit your questions using the Q&A feature of your webinar application. A recorded version of this webinar will be sent to everyone about 24 hours after the webinar as part of our follow-up. And for those of you who might be joining by telephone connection only, if you would like to submit questions at any point, please email those questions to Ezekiel. His email address is ezekiel@designthinkersgroup.us. That's EZEQUIEL at designthinkersgroup.us. Some of the panelists will be using a polling feature during their presentation. As we do the polls, you'll have about 15 seconds, maybe a little bit more, to respond to the poll. And what I'm going to do is we'll start with a quick poll, just so you get a feel for this. We'd like to get an idea about who's on the line. So I'm going to launch the first poll. And if you'd please respond to that, we'll start seeing the results here shortly. So the first question is, what is your background? Just pick the category that best describes you. Second question is, where are you currently living? And this third question is, what is your gender? We'd just love to understand a little bit about the audience. About 10 more seconds. Excellent. All right, about 5 seconds. Perfect. I'm going to end the poll now. And we're tabulating the results. And here are the results. Hopefully everybody can see that. So Ezekiel, I'm just going to ask you real quickly, are you able to see the poll results?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, very good. So that was fun. That gives you guys an idea of what to expect in terms of the polls as we go forward. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Arne. And Arne, let me just get your video up. And that is not Arne, but that is Arne right there.
Awesome. Thank you. So hi, everyone. I am completely nervous and scared because this is really weird. I see how many people are signing up or actually flowing into the space. I'm not really sure what all these numbers mean, but it is so weird not to see your faces, but actually having to talk to you anyway. So because I love kind of anybody who knows me, they know I like to be on the stage and talk. And I talk too much, so I'll try to kind of keep it brief at the moment, but I really want to see your faces and I don't. So I hope you can hear me, and I hope I can reach you anyway, even though I can't see you. So send me a smiley or something, or a frowny, whatever you want on the chat, if you want. So I wanted just to say that the reason for this webinar is, for me, is because, I mean, we are in this really weird, unprecedented crisis, and it affects all of us, and it affects, you know, I think everyone on this planet, and it's such an amazing, weird, and the tragic time that I felt that for me, it was the first thing I thought was like, I want to do something. But unfortunately, I can't do much. I also have a totally non-essential job, so it seems. So I'm stuck at home, like most of you. But I really want to do something. And the only thing I can actually do is bring people together and hopefully inspire people, but and do this. So so one of the things I would like to ask you as well to think about, you know, what can you do, and maybe you're doing this already, you know, what can you do, and just go and do it. Help someone. Can be small in your neighborhood, can be something big, can be anything, but think about what you can do. But the other thing is that I think it's so somehow ironic in a way that, you know, the social distancing is actually bringing us closer together in a way. It kind of, you know, it's like we're kind of united in our isolation. And I hope this kind of not only locks us down, it actually opens us up. And it opens our minds and our hearts and our eyes and our ears. And I do see, we see so many beautiful things happening. There's so many in the neighborhood, people putting up signs with their phone number saying, if anybody needs some help, you know, here's my number, please call me. I'm so, that is such a, you know, such a great thing to see as well, the beautiful things of what people can actually do. You know, we're all worried, I guess. I'm worried. I'm worried about my parents. I mean, they're in their 70s, 80s. I'm worried about, you know, my colleagues at my work, you know, people losing their jobs. I'm worried about, you know, I'm worried about my children not going to school. I don't know for how long, but I don't know. I think this year is kind of over for them. So I'm worried about what this will do to them. And I actually, you know, although most of my life as a total misfit, if you will, I mean, I've been a dropout as far as I can remember. I always said, you know, please, you know, embrace complexity and embrace the importance of an open mind and navigating chaos and being vulnerable, the whole thing. And you know, start with a beginner's mind. And beginner's mind meaning, you know, start with saying, I don't know. You know, I'm curious, but I don't know, and start from there. And I've always been saying that, but obviously I've been very privileged to have been, you know, born and raised in a very, you know, rich safe country like the Netherlands, and I'm totally privileged. And so starting to say, so to start with, no, I don't know, it might be easier to say than and right now at this moment, where the words "I don't know" are more true than ever, it's actually quite scary, to be honest, because I have no clue what this is going to do. I don't know what the effect of this crisis is going to be. I don't know what it's going to do long term. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't even know what it's going to do short term. But I do know that if you start with "I don't know," it also opens all kinds of possibilities. And I talked about possibilities and opportunities, and I heard other people talk about this, and I also heard people respond to this saying, yeah, but it's not a positive time, it's not a time for opportunity, it's a tragic time, and it is. Like I said, I'm also really worried, and we see what's happening, and I have no clue what's going to happen this week or next week with all the people in hospitals, and so it's bad. But I just want to say that just because it is so bad, and there are people suffering, and there are so many things happening, that is exactly the reason why we have to learn from this. We have to, it cannot be true in my mind that after this crisis, we go back to normal. We go back to, doing the things we've done always the same way. I think that would be something we should be totally ashamed of if that would happen. And I think so, even though we don't know what's going to happen, I think this is an opportunity. And just kind of give you a quote from someone I was inspired by. I walk by this window when I go to work quite often, and someone has a poster in the window, and it just says something that inspires me. It says, "Everyone said it was impossible until someone came by who didn't know that." And that's, to me, I think that's the mindset we need. But we didn't know it was impossible. So let's go fix that future, because the future is not here. We designed the future. So we are going to design the future. So it's our responsibility, and we're not going to, if we just go sit back and do nothing and just wait until this is over and try to kind of keep what we have and keep it the same, I think that'd be such a shame. And we should build something positive out of this tragedy. I think that to me personally, I feel there's a wave, and it's crashing down, and it's not all good. But you can fight it and kind of keep what you have, or you can write it. And I think we don't really have a choice. So I'm gonna, I'm gonna leave you with one quote, and then I'm gonna introduce the panelists to you. And the last quote, because it's another quote I always walk by when I go to work in Amsterdam. If you live in Amsterdam, there's underneath a bridge, you have this beautiful quote by Belle van Zijlen, an author, a lady she lived in the 1700s, and it says, "Returning is not the same as staying." And I've mentioned this quote quite often. So returning is not the same as staying. And to me, this crisis kind of gave it a new kind of depth, because we're not going to return, and the world will not be the same. It will be different when we go back to school and to our work, and we open the doors again of our houses. It's going to be different, and I just hope that we're going to make it a better world. And so let's go and use this big reset, this planet Earth reboot for good. Okay, that's kind of all I wanted to say. I wanted to say so many more smart things, but yeah, I'm not smart enough to be that profound, I'm afraid. I'm going to introduce the panelists to you. So Mark, if you can put up the slide with the panelists.
Just 1 second.
So the people that I've invited to come and all inspirational people to me, and I've known some of them really for a long time, some of them not that long, but there's the lineup. It's not the order of the people, the panelists that you're going to hear, but let me start by saying that David Kester, the first picture you see, I've known Dave for a very long time. He's been one of my heroes and a great inspiration. He will introduce himself shortly, but I've known him for a long time, and I'm also very honored and happy to have him as a partner as Design Thinkers Academy London founder. Then the guy who's actually with the same haircut as David, so to see, is John, and John Vorhaus. And John Vorhaus is someone I've met not too long ago, but he wrote an amazing book that, at least for me, was such an amazing experience to read, and it's called the Comic Toolbox. And anyway, so John is going to be here. He's a playwright. He's he's going to introduce himself also briefly. I'm very honored to have John here. It's very early for him as well. So I will introduce Esther, because Esther is going to be the speaker that is going to start as a panelist, her presentation. Esther is someone I invited. She spoke at the Design Thinking conference, the conference I organize each. And she impressed me with her knowledge as a science journalist, and her knowledge about all living in lifelike systems, so I asked her if she was willing to say something, because the first step in finding any solution is by understanding what exactly is it that we're looking at. And so Esther was willing to talk a little bit about viruses, and I'm very happy that she's willing to do so. So Mark, if we can switch over to Esther, that would be awesome.
Okay. And I am going to hand it over to Esther. Esther, welcome to the webinar. I have you up and I have your slides teed up.
Thank you very much, Mark. And thank you, Arne, for inviting me. I think it's very great idea to, first of all, come together in this virtual way, which somehow doesn't seem that virtual either. I mean, I can see my fellow panelists. I see people chatting and posing messages on the Q&A. So I do feel there are plenty of people out there now participating in this event. Arne asked me to explain briefly something about viruses, because, well, the reason we're all here now in this digital event is, of course, the outbreak of the new coronavirus. Disclaimer first, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a physician, I'm not a virologist. So for any specific medical or clinical questions, I'm certainly not the person to address, but you'll find professionals, I think, in your own countries and societies. So please consult them. But what I do know a bit about is about life and things that seem to be alive and that used to be alive, and the chemistry behind them. My background is in chemistry, that's what I write about. So, and to prevent this from becoming some kind of boring biology textbook lesson, I decided to give my presentation the form of a little quiz, the viral quiz under the title Viruses Part of Life. Before we start, I'd like a little bit more general information on the topic. Mark, could you set up the first slide, please?
Absolutely. And Esther, what I'm going to ask is that before we jump into that first poll, I want Ezekiel to address a couple of questions that have come in about how the panelists are able to respond to the poll. Do you want to do that now, maybe?
Oh, that's fine. Do that. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Ezekiel, if you would, I'm going to unmute you. And if you could just tell us, we've had a couple of people who are having problems actually responding to the polls, and I just want to make sure it's clear how that needs to be done. Over to you, Ezekiel.
Right. Well, when we can test out the poll, and I can let you know how it's rendering on the attendee side.
Okay, I'll just wait, Esther, until that happens, and then Ezekiel and I will stay on the line. And as soon as you're ready, I'll launch that poll, and we'll just let Ezekiel explain how it works.
Okay, perfect. Sure. Okay, well, what I hope everyone is seeing now is a grayish, dottish, not too sharp picture of 4 whitish circles with things sticking out. And I think most of you will by now recognize that these are coronaviruses. This is not the virus the world is currently in battle with. This is an old picture. It's from 1975 already. Of course, we all know coronaviruses is a big family, been around for a long time. And I'd like to show this because it really, and I know it's all dramatic and it's causing a lot of suffering, but I also admire the way these things work. They're very simple, very, very small, and they somehow manage to get the whole world in a grip, which I find also very intriguing and very fascinating. And what you see clearly here is the way they got their name. You see the thing sticking out, and it looks like a crown, like the corona. So this is actually a corona type that causes bronchitis in birds. So it's a bit related to what we're experiencing now, but it's another part of the family. And the next slide, please, Mark. There we see something completely different. This, much more recent. I have no idea how many of you recognize this. This is a very weird shape. It's not a worm, it's not a threat. This is the Ebola virus, and I think known to many of you. And the reason I show this is that, of course, now everything is all about the new coronavirus. And that is very logical and understandable. But Ebola is also still out there, and it is wreaking havoc and causing incredible suffering and misery and pain. And I really do hope that once we can somehow get over this new corona pandemic and get it under control, that we will not forget about the other viruses out there once this coronavirus is basically off our doorstep. I saw that most participants are either in Europe or in the US, and we are now for the first time basically confronted with such a pandemic, but there are many people around the world who this is a daily struggle in their life. So I really hope that we do not forget how invasive a virus can be now that we're all experiencing it, and that we do keep focusing on battling Ebola and Zika and dengue and all the other viruses out there that may not confront the rich countries, but are really a problem. So that's just my 50 cents for hopefully a better world after this. Now, time for the first question, Mark.
Okay, I'm going to launch this poll, and Ezekiel, if you'll walk us through how this works. Okay, and it should be launching right now. Ezekiel, what do you see?
Okay, we're not seeing a poll up yet.
No.
All right.
And remember, folks, it's not an exam, it's not a test. It's just a nice way to get you introduced to some basic viral knowledge.
Poll there yet, Ezekiel?
Okay, no, we do not have a poll yet.
Huh.
Sorry, folks, for the technical difficulties. We're working together.
I'll try it one more time.
In the meantime, I can already introduce the question a bit. It's about the big discussion whether viruses are alive or not. And due to the classical biological definitions, they are not. And the question is, of course, why are they not considered to be living organisms? Is it because they don't have their own genetic material? Do they need to borrow that from their host cell? So please, is that a yes or a no?
Okay, and attendees should be seeing the poll window. Just click on the radio button according to your answer, and your submit button should be working. So you can just click submit. Hopefully everything works for you on your end.
Okay. And we'll have about 10 more seconds
I'm very curious to see
Okay, we're
what
gonna
everyone thinks.
end the poll now. And here are the results. Calculating, can you see that?
See, not coming up yet for attendees.
Okay. Just to save some time, it's about 50-50. We have
Really?
46% yes and 54% no.
Okay, well, that's an interesting almost tie up. Well, the reason that they're not considered alive is not due to their that they don't have genetic material, because that's basically the only thing they do have. Viruses are little packets of genetic material hopping around, waiting for someone to take them up or to enter, and then they can use the rest of the cellular machinery to actually reproduce and get their own metabolism. So the reason viruses are classically not considered to be fully alive is they lack metabolism, so they cannot produce their own energy or process their own food, and they lack a way for independent reproduction. So they need a host cell to do that for them. But genetic material is what they really do have. And if you can put up, Mark, perhaps the next slide, I can explain that a bit in showing an animation, which is actually based on the new coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2. And what you see here is, it's of course, this is a drawing. I think that's so clear to everyone. And then if you see the slice through, you see this spiral-like thing in the circle. That is the genetic material. So viruses are basically little packets of genetic material covered by a coat buildup of proteins that allow it to be transported, stay intact, attached to a host cell, and then fuse with the host cell, inject their genetic material, and then the host cell will go on and just copy that new genetic material as if it was their own and produce new viruses, with all the sometimes horrible results out of that. That brings us to the next question. Could you say that all viruses are parasites? Mark, can you put up the next question, please? The next poll, and see how that goes. All viruses are parasites, yes or no?
Are the participants seeing the poll? Ezekiel?
I see the poll.
And for my participant view, I do see the poll window, and the submit button seems active.
Thank you. All right, we'll give a couple of 10 more seconds. And that's it. I'll end the poll.
Yeah.
And we're at the results, Esther, are 37% yes, 63% no.
Oh, that is surprising. So the majority thinks that viruses are not parasites. Well, I'm sorry, guys. They are. They really are true parasites, in the meaning that they cannot be active on their own. They need someone else, in this case, some other living cell, to make them thrive, to make them reproduce, and to get their activity going, to copy their genetic material and make new virus particles. So yes, whatever virus there is, they're all parasites. Parasites has, of course, a very negative connotation in our daily language. And in many cases, it is very negative, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But we'll get to that later on. And Mark, could you put up the next slide so I can illustrate this a bit about that parasitic behavior of viruses? That will be slide number 4.
Yep, it should be up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And what we see here is, again, is the Ebola virus. In the brown gold, you see little circles and long strands. The little circles are the new virus particles that are forming into the bigger one. And this is a lab recording. Here they're cultured in cultured kidney cells, monkey green cells. And here you can easily see how parasitic they are. I mean, they take over the cell, they take over the tissue, and they use it completely up for their own reproduction. This is, of course, a very nasty virus and a nasty parasitic behavior. It doesn't have to be this bad, but yes, in general, this is what viruses do. They are not very considerate about others. They just take and reproduce if needs be. And this is, I think, a very clear illustration. But the question is, of course, when we talk about viruses that make us or animals ill, why do they make us ill? That is the next poll question. Mark, could you put that up, please? Question number 3. And the question is, do we get ill because the DNA of the virus, so the genetic material of the virus, doesn't match ours? Is that what makes us ill? Yes or no?
Okay, we'll give it about 10 more seconds. And I'm going to close the poll now. And the results, Esther, are 28% yes, 72% no.
I see it here. Well, very well done. And that's exactly the case. Their DNA, it's not the problem of matching DNA. On the contrary, that is the whole problem, is that it matches our genetic material so well. That's the reason that our cells or animal cells that get infected can easily understand what the information on that piece of genetic material is, and they can incorporate it into their own system for reproduction and copying and making the new particles. So yes, the whole idea that we get ill is because there is such a good match. And Mark, if you can put up slide number 5, I can illustrate that again. What it does. Yeah, what we see here in blue, the big blue blob with all these folds is a T cell. And T cells are the cells in our immune system that are really the killer cells. Those are really targeted to destroy cells that don't belong there. So whether it is pathogenic bacteria or viruses, but also tumor cells that might emerge in your own body, T cells are the ones who are targeted to kill that off. And to illustrate how viruses can make us so ill, this is a particularly nasty case in point. What we see here in yellow, the little yellow spheres, are really tiny, are HIV. So the human immunodeficiency virus that causes AIDS. And what this virus does, it particularly attacks the cells in our immune system. So by feeding almost and using and hijacking this T cell, the virus can reproduce, and it basically shuts down your whole immune system, making sure that whatever otherwise very simple, innocent infection comes along might really make you sick or even kill you. So this virus is a really, really nasty strategy to actually attack that which is meant to protect us. And it doesn't, and the sheer fact that its genetic material is such a good match for ours makes that it can reproduce in the cell. And Mark, if you could put up slide number 6, then we have a very topical example that also shows the effect of viruses and why they can be so deadly and so dangerous. What we see here is the new coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2. Those are the very small purple dots, and you see they are completely engulfing and destroying the green thing they're in. And that is a cell, a human cell, and it's completely destroyed. And these viruses just go on to the next one. You see them moving to the next one, and they will destroy that. And then we'll go on to the next and the next. So what it basically does, this virus, is it just wrecks all those cells, wrecking the whole tissue and inhibiting your function, in this case, in your lungs. So this really shows how devastating a virus can be. And it's all because it is such a good match, and our cells can do that. They can copy it, they can reproduce it, and they're basically destroying themselves. So now, another question is, of course, how did viruses arise? Because in many cases, they are bad news. So why are they still alive? Why didn't cellular organisms find a way to beat them? Or how did they come about in the first place? Why are viruses here? And how? So one of the main questions still is, are viruses as old as life? They need life to thrive, but when they did arise? So Mark, could you put up the next question? Viruses are as old as life itself. Is that a yes or a no?
You guys are doing great on these polls. I think we got the poll thing down. Thank you so much. Okay, about 10 more seconds. And I'll just say that Esther's talk is kind of to set the groundwork for the presentations that are coming. We are kind of providing various different perspectives on our times right now. And this is a fascinating talk to kind of educate us all about what we're dealing with.
Do we have any results?
Okay. So the results are 79% and 21% no.
Yeah, that's very good. But I have to be honest, we of course don't really know how old life is. So we cannot with any certainty say that viruses are as old as life itself, because we know even less about the emergence and the origin of viruses than we do about life. But current thinking in the field and evidence shows to the fact that yes, the first parasites, genetic parasites, emerged right when the first forms of life emerged as well. So they really, and evolution has been a hand-in-hand exchange process between viruses on the one hand and living cells that turned eventually into us on the other hand as well. So yes, I think it's fair to say that viruses, and even in their most basic form, are as old as life itself. And we have an illustration for that, I think. Mark, could you put up the next slide? I think it's slide number 7, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, it should be up.
It's not as colored and nice as the other one are. Well, I'm not seeing it, but oh, there it is. Yes, very good. What we see here, the big blob you see is a bacterium. And attached to it, these tiny particles, those are the viruses. These are phages. Those are viruses that specifically, infect bacteria, plenty of them around. This, first of all, illustrates the huge size difference between a bacterium and a virus. And we all know bacteria are really small. You can't see those. Well, imagine how small a virus is if you look at this picture. And also bacteria are probably the oldest life form we know. And they already have this host of different viruses infected them, pointing to the fact that viruses are indeed very old as well. Well, 2 more questions to go, guys. The next question, Mark, could you put that up? Number 5. Who are the favorite hosts of viruses? Is it animals and humans? Are those the real favorite hosts of viruses? Are we the most loved by viruses to infect?
And we
Yes
have a race.
or no?
It looks like yes is winning. Lots of yeses. A couple more seconds for people to respond. And I'll just end it there. I think it's an overwhelming 74% yes and 26% no.
Okay. Well, that gives me a chance again to point out that we humans are so very full of ourselves. We always think that we are so special among all the life forms on the earth, but we're not. I'm sorry, we are not the favorite hosts of viruses, nor are animals. Everything that is alive has viruses preying on it, everything. From the smallest, simplest bacterium to fungi, to algae, to plants. Let's not forget plants. I mean, viruses, the first virus was discovered at the end of the 19th century in tobacco mosaic virus, very famous virus. Plants are filled with them. So yes, we have plenty of viruses attacking us and attacking animals, but we are not the favorites and we are not the only one. No, not that at all. So Mark, could you put up the next picture? Because I can show something really special. This is also a virus, and it's very big. It's one of a family of giant viruses, which are almost approaching the size of a bacterial cell. And the interesting thing is these giant viruses have their own viruses living in them. So viruses not only prey on everything we consider alive, they also prey on each other. So these are viruses infecting other viruses. So whenever you have a virus and something else, it will find a way, it will find a host. No special place for humans there. And that brings me to the final question. Mark, could you put that up, please? Question number 6.
Yep. And
yeah, bad news. Viruses are bad news. Is that a yes or a no? Do you have any idea on the polls, on the results?
Yeah,
Do we
we've
think
got about 60-40. It's 40% saying yes and 60% saying no. I'm just going to end it there.
Oh, that is very interesting. So we're not all in the bad news camp. That's encouraging too, because yeah, this is, of course, it depends on who you ask. And Mark, could you please put up slide number 9? We already saw it briefly coming, the colored one.
Yeah.
Yes, in many cases, viruses are bad news. Let there no be mistake about that, no misunderstanding. The ones that make us ill, the ones that make animals ill, plants ill, they are devastating. So yes, we need to be clear on that. But there are also plenty of viruses that can be beneficial for one organism and not for the other. For example, the phages I showed earlier, and here you see a graphic representation of one of those. This is a virus that infects bacteria, which is not good news for the bacterium, but it can be very good news for us. I mean, our guts, our intestines are filled with all kinds of bacteria. They just grow. And the ones that grows faster will grow faster even more, but they can turn into pathogenic bacteria if you get too many of those. But luckily, we also have plenty of these viruses in our intestines that can keep too fast-growing bacteria in check. And they do that because simply when the bacterium population increases, the virus population will increase and they will kill them off. So for us, it's very beneficial. That's the reason that these phages are also used in all kinds of medical therapies to selectively kill off bacteria. So that is good news for us. There are other ways that viruses can be very inspirational. If you look at this picture, I think it's, of course, this is not the real color. I think everyone understands that. It is a protein code of a virus, and it is very symmetrically organized. We see 3 different types of protein, which are ordered in a very neat way. And this is all self-assembling to package the genetic material. And scientists who are in material science, they are very inspired by the way viruses form their own packaging and trying to use that in synthetic ways to make all kinds of new self-assembling materials that could offer all kinds of new applications. And one of the applications could be in medicine again, that you can use this to package not a genetic parasitic material, but for example, a drug. Viruses are very capable of finding the place they want to be, attaching to the place they want to be, and delivering their precious cargo. Well, if you can replace the harmful genetic material by something that is actually useful, think about, for example, for cancer therapies, that you can target it in such a way that it only attacks the tumor and not the healthy tissue. This is a very huge line of research. And Mark, if you could put up the final slide, we see another variation on this theme, which also to me is a beautiful picture. It's not a phage, but it's a variation on, we know the human papillomavirus, which causes cervical cancer in humans. There's also a bovine variant. That's what we see here. I show this because it also illustrates again how symmetric and how well organized these viral packagings are. So if you can use this, is really a good inspiration to find new materials, new delivery methods that can hopefully bring us some good out of something that is potentially bad news. So to say that it's always bad news, no. In some cases, yes. So basically, both answers would have been correct. That was basically all I wanted to explain, very basic on viruses, hopefully in an accessible and also a bit of a fun way, because science can be fun as well. And I'm very much open to taking questions. So Mark, I'm handing over to you.
Very good, Esther. Thank you so much. And I saw a couple of questions come in myself that I'd like to just address real quickly. First of all, the polling feature apparently doesn't work in all browsers. We apologize for that, but I hope you understand that this is just a way to kind of animate the discussion and make it a little bit more interactive. I also saw some comments about people saying, hey, we're in a new age and we're all kind of learning how to do this interaction using technology. And of course, there are some glitches. We did a lot of rehearsal before this, but hopefully it's a good experience. Also, the point several of you made is, why are we talking about biology? Why are we talking about viruses? And I know Arne responded to that question briefly, but maybe, you know, my perspective on that is we need to, as design thinkers and human-centered designers, if we're working on solving a problem, we need to understand the context of the problem. And we're all dealing with a context that's very, very new to most of us. And so I'm not personally answering that question, but that's my perspective on it. Esther, did you have anything you wanted to say about the whole reason why we're talking about viruses?
Well, I think it is in general very good to hear about stuff that you're not confronted with during your daily life. I mean, the world is such a complex and big place with so many things going on. It's impossible to know everything, but I think it is very useful to try and get some basics right. Also, and pardon my French, to counter all the bullshit that is out there. There are so many people talking about stuff that they really don't know about, and they shouldn't do that. That I as a science journalist and as a science writer, I always try to get some facts in there and to open people's minds to thinking differently and really thinking about what someone is saying and does it make any sense. And in many cases, we don't know a lot of things. So there's a lot of grayscale in here. And I think that whatever your profession is or your interest in, the reality in talking about viruses is viruses are out there. Whether you work in the field or not, they can attack you, they can attack anything around you. So I would think that it would be interesting for anyone to just learn a little bit more about that, because there is no escape from them. And there will be regulations are now in place in many countries in the world because of these viruses. So it might be good to have a bit more knowledge about that. So why are we doing all this? Why do we take these measures? Is it really necessary? What does it bring us? What can we expect from the future? Because I don't like to be a doomsday thinker, but this will not be the last pandemic we're facing. So I think it is good to understand every now and then something completely different than your everyday life. And you don't need to be, we can't all be virologists or biologists, just like I'm not a design thinker, and that is completely new to me. But I like to hear more about it, particularly because I don't know a lot about it. So I hope that explains a bit on why I think knowing some basics about science every now and then will benefit everyone.
Fantastic. I'm going to throw it over to Ezekiel for one last question to Esther. Ezekiel, what do you got? I got you off of mute now.
No other questions on my end at this time.
Okay.
There are a bunch of questions in there I see that we can respond to when we do the wrap up after the webinar. So thank you, Esther. That was fantastic. I'm going to give you a round of applause. Yay! And I'm gonna kind of scare everybody with my face now. And as many of these questions have come in, we really enjoy seeing the interaction from everyone. The Q&A feature is the way that you submit your questions. If for some reason you can't use that, send an email to Ezekiel@designthinkersgroup.us. And we're going to move on rapidly to our next presenter, and that is John Vorhaus. And John, I'll hand it over to you and take it away, and we'll go on mute again. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. We've been talking about viruses. Esther, thank you for that presentation. It was inspiring and really, really scary. I'm going to change gears a little bit and stop talking about viruses and start talking about you, the folks who are listening in and visiting with us today. Sorry, I should introduce myself. My name is John Vorhaus. I live in Southern California, where we're having our own little coronavirus episode. Mark and the design thinkers and Arne know me as the author of the book, The Comic Toolbox, How to Be Funny Even If You're Not, a book that I was lucky to write a while ago, and it's created a foundation for my career. But I've worn a lot of hats in my career. I've done a lot of consulting, a lot of creative development of television and film shows. I'm probably the only one here today who ran the writing staff of the Russian version of Married with Children. That's on my resume too. And none of that has much of anything to do with what I'm going to talk about today, because what I want to share with you today are some strategies for how to get better outcomes. The thrust of my conversation today is, no matter the circumstances we find ourselves in right now, we're always confronted with the possibility of looking at events in the future and asking ourselves, how can we get the most out of the events that are to come? How can we create good outcomes? Mark, if you could just pop up the slide, please. So today I'm going to share with you a strategy for getting good outcomes with the acronym PSCAER: prospect the future, set goals, check feelings, anticipate setbacks, engage, reflect, and actually there's another point, repeat. So it should be PSCAERR, which makes an impossible acronym just that much more impossible. Thank you very much. I really wasn't thinking too much about pronounceability when I created this template, but I'm going to run through it. I'm going to run through it pretty quickly. So you might want to take some notes or plan on reviewing this material later, because what I propose to you is this is a way to think about events that are coming up in your life, think about them effectively, think about them powerfully, move through them in good spirit and with good outcomes and with good strategy and good results. It's a lot to take on, so let's get to it. We're going to start with the first step, which is prospecting the future. Now recognize we are in a new space, and new spaces can be intimidating. Even if you expect to find yourself in a good space, and even if you expect to do well in it, it gets easier to navigate this space if you just take appropriate steps before, during, and after the good outcome. So the first step, prospect the future. Consider and list likely outcomes. What this boils down to is, what do you expect will happen? If you're going out on a date, what do you expect to happen? Pleasant conversation, nice chat, maybe a kiss at the end of the date. That's a likely outcome. Write this down, and I'm going to stress this point over and over again. The utility of this system is that it lets you think about things in a concrete way, but it only lets you think about them if you write stuff down. If you consider yourself not to be a writer, don't worry about it. What you write, it doesn't have to be pretty, just informational. It's a way of collecting data and putting it in a form that you can use. That is to say, taking ideas out of your head and putting them onto a piece of paper where you can look at them with your eyes, process them effectively. So consider and list likely outcomes. This is where you start as you think about a job interview or a class you're teaching, or as I said, a date or a meeting with your parents or your kids, anything at all. It's an outcome that you're contemplating, and there can be a likely result. Next, Mark. Next, contemplate what will happen if things go according to plan. This really boils down to, what do you hope will happen? What is the ultimate best outcome that you can anticipate if you do your thing and you do it well and you get the consequences that you're after? Next, please. List possible unexpected outcomes. We might think of these as negative outcomes, things that go wrong. And these also go down on the list because you want a complete picture of what is to happen. What do you fear might happen? So now we have what you hope will happen, what you expect to happen, and what you fear will happen. If you view future events through these three filters, expectation, hope, fear, you'll have a pretty good sense of what's going on. You'll have a pretty good sense of what you're going to encounter as you go through the experience that is in your future and yet to come. Next slide, please, Mark. Next, set goals. Well, there's a lot to talk about here. Broadly speaking, you want to understand that goals exist for yourself as an individual, for the people around you, and for the group as a whole. And right now I'm speaking to those of you who have a leadership role in a team situation, or maybe a leadership role in a family situation. This is where you really can prosper by thinking about goals in an effective and concrete sort of way. So the first thing you want to do is determine your goal or goals for the engagement. What do you want out of the experience? What constitutes a win for you? I want to focus in on this word win because it's very, very important. What constitutes a win for you? What will you consider to be a successful outcome from your point of view? Next, please, Mark. Now take a look around the people you're going to encounter, your collaborators, your team, your office mates, your sports teammates, your family, your peer group, and ask yourself for each and every one of them that you expect to encounter in this engagement that's coming up, what would constitute a win for them? What are their goals? What do they want out of the situation? This isn't that hard to do. It's not magic to figure out what people want. We'll talk about this more in just a minute, but the short understanding is you have a much keener insight into other people's minds and thoughts than you imagine. And this is where you exercise that insight simply by writing down what you think will be a win for people around you. Next, please, Mark. The third final part of this is list common goals for all stakeholders. What does the group as a whole want? Are you trying to come up with a successful ad campaign or a successful design for a product? Or are you trying to, I don't know, choose a game that the whole family can play while you're under self-isolation? The common goal is the win that everybody shares. And so we see that we have goals for ourselves as individuals, goals for people around us, and goals for the group. And here's where the magic happens. If you have these goals written down on a piece of paper in front of you so that you can look at them, you can start to look for goals or outcomes that will represent wins for everybody. A win for yourself because it's part of what you want, wins for other people individually because it meets their needs, and wins for the group as a whole. What this boils down to is the concept of wins all around. When you enter a group situation with the goal of delivering wins all around, you put yourself in a really powerful position. You make yourself an ally to everyone you encounter, and you make yourself, in a sense, admirable to everyone you encounter because your spirit is so good and your intention is so good. You want nothing less than for everyone to leave the encounter with a victory in hand. Mark, let's look at that next slide, please. All right, now we're going to get into something that might make you feel a little nervous, but I don't want you to feel nervous. I want you to recognize that part of moving effectively through engagements is knowing what's going on in your head and in your heart. And this means you need to check your feelings. Now, in my practice, I'm really about making things detailed and specific and breaking them down into nuts and bolts, easy questions that I can answer. If I ask you to think about your feelings in a vague and general sense, I'm going to get a vague and general answer. But if I ask you to think about your feelings specifically in a hardcore logical way, broken down into small, tiny parts, you're going to do really well with this. So we're going to break it down. We're going to start by asking what feelings we have before the engagement begins. How do we feel going in? Broadly speaking, you can anticipate feeling hope, anxiety, fear. Hey, if you want an example of that, we had some discussion before this seminar started, or before this workshop started, about how we as presenters felt. Certain amount of nervousness because we're engaging in a new technology. A certain amount of anticipation or hope, a certain amount of enthusiasm that we're, what's the word I'm looking for, that we're giving to the community. So we have these complex feelings, you have these complex feelings. If you just write them down saying, this is how I feel right now as I anticipate future events, that's going to put you in touch with yourself. And let me tell you a secret. for this situation, for all situations, for any situation you can think of. When you are in touch with yourself, that gives you a competitive edge. And if you don't believe it's true, just think about people around you who aren't in touch with themselves, who don't have a profound sense of self-awareness, and think how hard it is for them to function effectively as individuals and as collaborators. If I had a slide, I could graph it for you, but the higher your level of self-awareness, the greater your level of effectiveness in almost any situation you can imagine. Next, please, Mark. Okay, now I want you to cast your feelings forward and thinking about the feelings that you might experience during the engagement. Right now, I'm thinking about going on a job interview. You anticipate going into that interview, you expect to feel nervous, you hope to score some points with the interviewer. If you get the job, you're going to feel really, really great, like high. All of these are possible feelings that you will experience in the future. This is another elaboration of your self-awareness, but look what's happening. You've immediately prior to this, you have thought about, how do I feel right now? Now I'm asking you to think about how you will feel at a certain point in the future. Now you are thinking about yourself in the present and in the future at the same time. You're starting to time travel, by the way, which is a skill you can learn, but that's a subject for a different time. Next, please. Contemplate others' feelings that you expect to encounter. Just as we talked about goal setting for everyone in the room, you can also ask yourself, what are the feelings of the other people I'm likely to encounter? Again, to take the example of a job interview, what is the interviewer feeling? How will the interviewer feel if you perform effectively? How will the interviewer feel if you demonstrate nervousness or self-consciousness? In all of these ways, you can use your feelings as the bedrock for strategies that you will use when you enter the engagement. Let's just move on. I know I'm going through this fast, but we got a lot of ground to cover today, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. So let's look at the next slide. Anticipate setbacks. This is something that I think people don't give a lot of attention to because they don't really want to think about what could go wrong. But here's another kind of insider tip. I've been in a lot of rooms and I've given a lot of thought to what might happen in those rooms before I go into them. And one of the things that I'm aware of is setbacks will happen. Things will happen that I hadn't anticipated and don't want. And if I've taken the time prior to an engagement to think these things through and really list what could go wrong, what could go a little wrong, what could go horribly wrong, what's unexpected, what is really unexpected, then you're really, really in a strong position to move ahead. So familiarize yourself with worst case scenarios for two good reasons. First, if you do that, you won't get caught off guard when something unexpected happens. And second, it won't throw you so much if it happens. You will have prepared in advance for an unexpected outcome. Again, we're talking about a strategic approach to gaining good outcomes. Next, please. Map potential conflicts between stakeholders' goals. If you're in a room with two other people and those two people are having a conflict, that's an issue for you to deal with. If you've thought about it in advance, what might these people fight about? Might they fight over control issues, power issues, status issues? Might they push back against me for my efforts to take control? Might they be serving goals that are not in harmony with the group goals? These are all questions you can ask in advance, and you can map strategies for navigating them. This is the part of the template where you build those strategies, but you build your strategies under the controlling idea of wins all around. Your goal in the engagement is to give everybody an awesome time. And if that sounds like a little too, maybe too California, a little too new age for you, your goal is to deliver wins all around to make sure everybody has an awesome time. I don't need to tell you what that experience is like. You already know it. If you've ever thrown a party and it's been a great party, you know how great it is to deliver wins to everybody for as far as you can see. And you know how really, really great they feel about you when you make them feel good. Next, please. Mark. there we go. List potential status issues or other sources of interpersonal friction. This is where you think about how people are likely to interact with each other and where that's likely to go wrong. I'm going to propose something to you. When things are going wrong between other people, you have the opportunity to be a lubricant of a sort. Your self-awareness and your other awareness puts you in a position to make things run smoothly for everyone else. And again, under the controlling idea of wins all around, this is easy to do. You don't suffer status loss. You don't suffer loss of power or control or leadership. In fact, you gain these things just by making everything run smoothly for everyone else. So this is a way of saying that a key part of success in generating good outcomes is mediating conflict between other people effectively. It's easy to do once you have your own self-awareness turned up high and once you have other people's awareness, your awareness of others also turned up high. Next slide, please. All right, now we're there. We're engaging. We are in the outcome that we're trying to make a good outcome. The first thing I do in a situation like this is BSR. Breathe, smile, relax. Breathe. Why breathe? Take a deep breath and you'll see for yourself. When you breathe, you saturate your brain with oxygen. I don't know if you know very much about brain chemistry. I know nothing about brain chemistry except what I make up. But I imagine that my brain wants one thing and one thing only, and that thing is oxygen. And if I give my brain lots and lots of oxygen, I can lull it into a false sense of security. As long as my brain has lots of oxygen, it feels good and I can perform effectively. So anytime I enter an engagement, anytime you enter an engagement, you breathe heavily, breathe deeply a few times just to saturate your brain with oxygen, and that'll give you a boost going in. The second boost you can give yourself is the simple act of smiling. It's biological. If you smile, people smile back. If you smile, you like them, they like you. It's a bonding ingredient. We've already talked about a lubricant. Now here's a bonding ingredient, the simple smile. And finally, relax. And relaxing isn't a matter of taking tranquilizers before you go into an engagement or a couple of shots of whiskey. Those are not the advised strategies. Relaxing is actually a matter of setting expectation. If you go into a situation with super high expectations, it's hard to be relaxed. Because if you have super high expectations, you put super high pressure on yourself. To reduce pressure, reduce expectations. When you lower your expectations, you reduce pressure and you improve performance. I learned this lesson from Michael Jordan, of all people, not directly, but I saw him competing in an NBA Finals, and they asked him, "What's your goal for this game?" And he said, "Well, I'm just here to have fun." Of course, it was a lie. He wanted to win the game, but he told himself, all I have to do is have fun. He lowered his expectation, lowered his pressure, increased his performance. So the key to relaxing, again, reduce expectations, set your sights a little lower. That will reduce the pressure you put on yourself, and that will increase performance. And so, sorry, I lost my place there. I got it back. So now you're ready to go. You're relaxed, you're breathing, you're smiling, you're BSR, and we're ready for the next slide. This is just going to work. Execute your contribution or leadership according to your goals. This is just about doing your job. If you are in leadership in a situation, if it's your job to lead the group, consider that an effective leader does not lead from ahead, but leads from within. And again, this goes back to the concept of wins all around. If it's clear to everyone around you that your concern is making sure that everyone has a good experience and a good outcome, that will put you in a profoundly powerful leadership position. That never doesn't work. Wow, that's a terrible double negative. That always works. So give that a try. If you're not in leadership, if it's not your job to lead the engagement, but to participate in the engagement, you can still be in service. You can be in service of common goals. And here's the great thing about being in service of common goals. If it's clear to people around you that even though you're not a leader, you are profoundly interested in helping everybody attain what they want out of the situation, that lifts you up. That lifts your status. It makes people feel good about you. And it makes you feel better about yourself. So even if you're not in charge, you can still be in service, because when the team wins, you win. So that's wins all around. Next, please. Monitor other stakeholders. What else is going on in the room? Are other people's goals and needs being met? If they're not being met, then why aren't they being met? And if they are being met, how can you help them be met even better? This is where you engage your other awareness. We've already talked about having self-awareness as a strategic advantage. If you have self-awareness, you have an edge over people who don't have self-awareness. But the thing is, if you have self-awareness, you also have the potential for other awareness. That is to say, if you can think about what's going on in your head effectively, you can also think about what's going on in other people's heads effectively. And this is actually kind of a trick of mind reading. And that's another subject we can get into at another time. It really is quite easy to read other people's minds. I can share that secret with you if you'd like to know. But here's what you need to know. If you make it your goal to make other people's experiences better, you will gain because you'll feel good about yourself for helping them. And they will gain because you know you helped. And then the team gains because everyone is working together and helping each other all around. And that's wins all around. And that's really what I should have what I really mean by good outcome, and perhaps what I should have called this presentation in the first place, wins all around. Next, please, Mark. Now the engagement is over, and now you're going to do a little bit of post-mortem. You're going to reflect on what happened. You're going to record, that is to say, write down the outcomes, the issues that arose, the setbacks, the discoveries, everything that happened during the engagement. Really write it down. Why really write it down? Because this is how you build a record of yourself and a practice of doing better what you want to do well. What we're really talking about here is having a practice of effective interaction with other people. And you build your practice just like you build your practice of anything else by recording, by doing what you do, and then figuring out what you did well, what you did not quite so well, how you can improve what you've done, how you can perform better in other engagements to follow. And just to be clear, when I'm using this word engagement, I'm not speaking of it literally in terms of a marriage engagement. I'm really speaking about it in terms of any interaction you might have with another individual or with a group of individuals, or even with yourself. I mean, let's just contemplate that you want to do a painting. You can think of that painting as an engagement and use all of these same strategic tools to get a good outcome for the painting itself. For those of you who are in creative practice, you understand this. You enter an engagement with your creativity, with fear, hope, anticipation, enthusiasm, dread, all of these feelings. You have strategies for engaging effectively, and all of these are tools that you can use over and over again to get better outcomes in your engagement, whether that engagement is with the self, with another, or with the group, or as we're seeing right here, with the whole wide world. Next, please. Okay, list what went according to plan and what didn't. You had some strategies in mind. You used some of those strategies. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. Which ones worked? Why did they work? What unanticipated setbacks did you encounter? How did you respond to those setbacks? How did you operate effectively in this space? To think about this effectively, to think about this well, just disconnect from value judgment. What happens or happened isn't a good thing. It isn't a bad thing. It's just a thing that is. And if you have this dispassionate, objective point of view, then you can really examine events without judging yourself harshly for failing or feeling too great about yourself for succeeding, but just asking and answering the question, what did I do? What did I learn? And how can I take those pieces of information to improve outcomes next time? Next, please. Check your emotional state after the fact. Now that it's over, how do you feel? How did you feel while it was going on? How did you feel immediately after? How do you feel now? I don't want to belabor this point, but your emotional agenda is just as important as your strategic agenda. You want to keep your eye on your feelings pretty much all the time. And if it sounds like I'm proposing a certain kind of schizophrenia, where you're doing a thing and then watching yourself do the thing, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I am proposing functional schizophrenia, where you engage in an act and observe yourself engaging in the act so that next time you can engage in the act more effectively. This is the fundamental building block of practice. This strategy works in all engagements, in all enterprises, anything you can think of. If you know what you're doing and know how you feel about what you're doing, you are in command. Next, please. Well, just repeat it. Use your PSCAERR as a template for future engagements. I really wish I had come up with a better anagram, because that one, not anagram, acronym. Gosh, and I'm a word guy. I'm going to have a word with myself about that later in terms of fine-tuning my own performance. I will make a note. I'll probably write it down. Remember that an anagram is not an acronym. Get that stuff right. Anyway, you now have a template for future engagements, and you can use that template to operate more effectively and get better outcomes next time you find yourself in a similar or the same situation, or even a wildly different one. Because not only are you building better outcomes, you are building a greater capacity for having good outcomes. You're reaching a point where almost anything you think to undertake, you have a viable foundational strategy for doing it well. Next, please. Share your methodology with others. Teach, yeah? Teach what you learn. Teach what you learn about yourself. Teach what you know. Why? Because if you teach what you know, you will find you will demand of yourself that you know what you're talking about. You will demand of yourself that you articulated, hey, I learned that when heads get hot in a meeting, a 30-second break or breath holding exercise or some other strategy I came up with, that really helps. And I'm going to share that with you so that I understand it better, so that I can use it more effectively later myself. Share those strategies with others, and you will really, really, really anchor them to your practice. And that's what you want to do with all of this stuff. Just anchor it to your practice so that it's there for you, kind of like a virus inside a cell, only a benign virus that would be there to support the work of the cell in all situations. Next, please, Mark. Refine your approach based on your evaluation of outcomes. Now, I've recently learned that this is the yoga concept of samskara, which I loosely interpret to mean investing prior experience in future outcomes. Everything you go through in your life is a platform upon which you stand to do a better job next time. If you take the time to be thoughtful before, during, and after any engagement you're involved with, you will build the building blocks that will make subsequent engagements easier, fun, and more effective. If you think about it in those terms, you can recognize that your life is a constantly rising road from good performance to better performance to great performance. I hope you find this strategy useful. If I've gone through it too lickety split for you, you can review the slides or review this portion on when you have the recording in hand. If you have any questions, now's the time.
Thanks, John. That's excellent. Very good framework for approaching these kinds of complex problems and leading people through. And I'm just going to, if I can, turn over to Ezekiel. Ezekiel, do you have some questions from the audience?
Let's see. In the interest of time, we have a couple of questions, John. I think for some of us, definitely resonate with this. It says, in your experience, why do you feel there's a nervousness or hesitation around being in touch with our feelings?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Yeah. Why do you feel there is nervousness or hesitation around being in touch with our feelings?
Why do I feel that? Because I experience it all the time, and because I think it's a natural human feeling. We exist in a matrix of hope and fear all the time. We're experiencing it now. We hope coronavirus won't, kill us and stuff, and we fear that it might. If the feelings are negative, there's bound to be some nervousness around them. I consider negative feelings to be kind of like black holes in my mind, places that I'm afraid to go. And the more directly and forcefully and forthrightly I explore those feelings, the less emotional hold they have over me. But to the questioner, I would say, if you don't have any nervousness or reticence about confronting your feelings, then you're blessed, and you can ignore that part of the discussion.
Yeah, and somebody else asks if there's a blog post or something that they can look up online where they can review these points and go over at their own pace.
Wow, that's a really good question. This content that I'm sharing with you is from a book that I'm currently writing called The Book of Practice. I don't have it posted online, but anybody who reaches out to me individually, I'll be happy to share my slide deck with you that contains all of this information. And of course, it will be available in the webinar after the fact, correct?
And can you remind people where they can reach you?
Oh yeah, johnvorhaus.com, johnvorhaus.com, just my name. There's a contact link there. It's protected by artificial intelligence. You have to add 5 plus 7. I'll give you a hint. The answer is 12. But if you do that, then you can send an email straight to me and I will answer you straight away.
Great, thank you. Mark, back to you.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Thanks, Ezekiel. We'll have the panelists' emails will be the last slide so that you can all write those down. So thanks, everybody, for all of your questions and comments in the chat. In the Q&A, there's a lot of chat as well. I did want to mention that the Zoom features that we're working with, we have some control over them, but not complete control. And it appears that as people thumb up somebody's question, it changes the order of the questions and it makes it looks like the questions are getting deleted, but they're not actually getting deleted. There's somebody on our side actually deleting questions. We will do our best to try to respond to the questions after the webinar. In a post, Arne is going to talk a little bit about this, so we'll be writing a blog post. So that I realize I'm also not appearing here. There I am. Cool. And so we have one more, actually 2 more folks coming up. I'm going to introduce now our next speaker, and it's a good friend of mine and ours. David Kester. And David, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Hi, Mark, and hi, everybody. And it's great to be with you. It's now 4:30 in the UK. I'm going to promise you no PowerPoint whatsoever, though I have rigged up some things in our room here in our conservatory so that I can show you some bits and pieces. So it's been a bit Heath Robinson, as you can see. So that's our kitchen steps with a pigeon holding down my neighbor's tripod with a camera hanging from it. So, you know, just so you know what you're looking at. I know it looks all very simple with the camera facing me, but there we are. That's my strange world that I'm living in right now. Anyway, it's lovely to be with you. And actually, Mark, if you want to just spotlight me, we can move away from my strange setup, my Heath Robinson setup, and maybe just have me. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. So it's lovely to be with you all today. I'm David Kester. I run the Design Thinkers Academy in London and also DKNA, which is a strategic design consultancy. Our mission is all about creating responsible revolutions. So we run design projects. We also help train people, all about inspiring people on the journey from creativity and ideas through to innovation. And that's really what excites me, is people's boundless creativity. And we've been seeing a huge amount of that over the last few days. So Arne contacted me only last week to say that this was going on and could I join this? And he had a challenge, which was, is there something that we could give away? I mean, as John Vorhaus has also been doing, I mean, was there something that we could give at this point? Something relating to design thinking and creativity. And there is some work that we've been doing, and I'd like to make that available today. And in fact, I'd like to engage everybody around it. And it's a new way to think about our strengths as innovators, whether that's as an individual or whether that's in a team, or indeed, because we're in our homes, a lot of us now, with our families. and think about our creativity and how we create change and innovation. We created a system, and I'm going to explain a little bit about that. It's actually all contained in a little deck here, or at least an introduction to it is contained in a little deck. And you don't have to worry, I'm not trying to sell it. In fact, we will make it available to everybody free, and I'll be putting up a QR code at the end of this talk so that everybody can get hold of it. But what's in it? There are some cards, there's and some explanations and ways of using this little deck. And the background to it is it sets out some of the key strengths, 5 peak strengths that make up all leaders in innovation. These are the strengths we rely on to be innovators. And it was developed by a group of design researchers and designers, academics and business psychologists, along with leading innovators. And it's got a long research base, and over the Q&A, if someone wants to ask me about that, I'd be delighted. No notes are required from what I'm discussing with you. As I said, we're going to make this deck entirely available to you. So I thought, rather than hear me sort of talk it through with you, let's have a go. We've never done this before. Normally we do this with a small group of people, maybe a team in a business, or maybe one-to-one in some coaching or in pairs. But I'm going to try this now. I'm not sure how many people we've got online, but I'm hoping it's a few hundred. So it'll be the first time that we've done this online and with such a large number. I'm going to switch now so that I can explain a little bit about this to you. In a moment, I'm going to switch onto my webcam, but let me talk you through first these 5 key strengths. And as I talk you through the strengths, I'd like you to think which one resonates most with me. So which one of these key strengths is really the thing that you see as the strength that enables you to be creative and drive change and innovation. And what I would say is we all exhibit these strengths in some shape or form, but there will be one that you can really use as your driver. And I hope you'll identify with one, and I want you to try and pick it. So I'm going to talk you through them. I'm going to hold these cards up to my camera and I'll talk to them. There are 5 of them. And then when we do a poll, you'll see them come up again. So hopefully you can see that. The first strength is all about activation. So it's called Activate. And it's all about purpose, confidence, drive. So it's how we as individuals can enable others to get the purpose and the vision and make things happen. So in your own life, it's a lot to do with self-activation, but what you can do in an organization, it might be how you can set the vision for others. So activate. I mean, is this something that's your key strength, activation? Well, let's move on to the next. So the next key strength is called frame. And frame is a very key strength for anyone who works, say, in ethnography or research, and a very key strength of design thinking. It's about sensing the world, so a lot to do with empathy, but it's also about embracing complexity. The word I often use is integrative thinking, bringing lots of different types of data together. So is that your key strength? Is that the thing that you rely on in what you do? Is that something that's your strength that you can build on? So frame, sensing, embracing complexity, integrative thinking. So let's have a look at the next. So the next one is create. Now, of course, a lot of people who work in design would automatically find that this resonates with them. It's the actual spirit of making and experimentalism, and also being reflective, so that you don't hang on to ideas, but you're able to move on to have many ideas and help the creative process. So create, is that your key strength? Is that the thing that you'd say is the thing you'll really build on?
David,
So,
could you hold that, David, if you could just hold that up a little bit. It's getting cut off at the bottom on the camera. Just
Yeah.
a little bit, back it up there. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on to the next. And the next key strength is implement. So, and hopefully you can see that. So it's very much, for anyone who has to drive projects through and innovation projects, they'll recognize this term. It's about determining outcomes. It's about performance discipline. It's about pragmatism and often making many compromises. So is that something that's actually at the heart of what you do and one of your key strengths? Very, very important skill, of course. And the final one of these 5 strengths is orchestrate. So, and I hope you can see that. There we are. So it's the ability to influence, to sense the social issues, the social management, collaboration, your ability to organize others and pick up the mood as well. So all of these 5 strengths are incredibly important. They all work together. Everybody exhibits them to some greater or lesser degree. But which is your peak strength? Because the key thing is to find that peak strength and play to it. So what I'm going to ask is, let's do a live poll. This is the first time. What I'd really like to do is find out who's in the room. So let's find out. And what I want you to do is pick your key strengths. So the question is, which one of these words best describes your peak strength as an innovator? Is it activate? Is it frame? Is it create? Is it implement? Is it orchestrate? So let's find out who's in the room.
Excellent. Thanks, David. The poll is live. And we'll give it about...
And are we still alive out there?
Yeah, there's some people still out there. We've got a good crowd on the call and lots of votes coming in.
Oh, good. So what I'm going to do is, as we get our votes in, we're going to put those onto our little mat here, which explains, and I will explain how we begin to interpret the results. So imagine this was a team. We are a team today. Everybody out there who's participating is part of this team. So let's find out who's in the team.
Right.
Have we got those results?
Yep. Can you see them?
Now I can't see them, so
okay.
But maybe you can call them out to me. And if you call them out in percentages, that would be really, really helpful. And I'm going to write those down, and then we're going to look at them together.
Okay. The activate is 15%.
Activate is 15%.
Frame, 38%.
Frame is 38%. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Create is 20%.
Create is 20%.
And maybe because design thinkers maybe aren't all that great at this, implement is only 9%.
9%, right? You see, it's really interesting. So we're going to have a little think about what this will mean for us as a team, if particularly approaching a creative project. And finally,
orchestrate is 18%.
18%. Brilliant. Okay. So I'm going to switch my camera and I'm going to introduce you to the system that really underpins all this. So let's have a look. Now you can see why I did my Heath Robinson device. Good. I hope you're seeing what I'm seeing.
Yep.
So what you've got here, let me just explain. For those of you who are involved in design and design thinking, you'll probably immediately recognize what's going on here, because this is the design process going through here. And this is what's often referred to as the double diamond, going on a journey from discovery and definition through to the development and also then the final delivery of a solution. So often we start on a journey of innovation with a challenge. We redefine it as a brief. we come up with a design solution, and then we take it into the market in some shape or form, and it becomes value out there, whether that's social value or financial value or other value. So when we're in this space here, that's where the whole strength around framing really comes into its own. And indeed, a lot of researchers are particularly good here at sensing and embracing complexity. As we open up here into the development of ideas, that's where a lot of prototyping and ideation happens, and then user testing and refining and reflecting on our ideas. Of course, that's where the real strength in creation comes. That's not to say that you don't want to have all of the skills in your team, but you might want to have somebody who's really, really robust leading on the frame side, who feels that that's their great strength, pulling in a multidisciplinary team, same on create. And of course, as you move through, you need people who've really got a key strength here in implementation, determining outcomes. So you're following this line, but actually what we discovered when we pulled this model together, and it was based on research over 20 years of research in high performance leadership and also in design, that you all the way through, you need these strengths in activation. So strengths around setting the vision and making sure that people always understand wherever you are, what the purpose is, and driving through for results. And you need this ability, particularly because so much of what happens within the creative space is about co-creation and many people. You need great skills in influencing, collaboration, and social management. So let's have a look now. When I said, well, who's in the room? So we're a team today. So let's actually have a look. If we place now, we can see we had about 15% in Activate. We had 38% in Frame. We had about 20% in Create. We are about 9% Implement, and 18%, I'll put it over here, Orchestrate. So what sort of team are we? Well, I think what's really interesting immediately is that I can see that we've got a lot of people who are going to be, and maybe we've got quite a few people who are strong in design research. Maybe we've got some people who love ethnography, but we've got people here who are going to be very good at sensing what's going on out there and having empathy and helping us to frame up our problems. So this is a great team for supporting that. But also, we've got some people who might feel that their great strength is in creating, and that's really helpful. So building our solutions, we can rely and we're going to look to those individuals too. But it is interesting to see, as Mark pointed out, that just today we maybe haven't got the people who see their greatest strength as driving problems through to the market itself. So maybe that's partly because we cast out to people who saw themselves as creatives and creative thinkers. So we're going to be very good at staying on mission, because we've got some people who are going to keep us there. We're going to be brilliant at finding new insights, and that's going to be really important. But of course, what I've done is I've painted a somewhat simplistic picture, haven't I? Because in fact, we are all really multidisciplinary. We exhibit many of these strengths. If I were actually looking at this, and I was doing this with you now, I'd probably be asking you to organize these and find actually what your own profile looked like, because maybe actually you would have some of these strengths might be out in front, others would be behind. But let's take one further look, and if I may, I hope you're with me on this journey now. Let's dig a little bit deeper into what an individual strength might look like. And I'd like to explain, I'm going to come back to my Mac now. So on the reverse of our little cards, and I suppose really what I'm doing here is I'm showing you how you can play this. Actually, you can use this in many ways. There are a number of exercises that we set out in this if you do choose to download it. And also, if you want to really go deeper into this, there are online profiling tools that are based on this approach. But what I'd really like you to do is I'd like you to think about a different dimension here of these strengths, because you may feel that the strength that you identified with is something which you have, it's part of your core discipline. For instance, those people who set out frame, and we had a lot of people who said framing was something which was a personal strength. Well, that might be because actually you are a researcher or a design researcher. And maybe it's something that you do in your daily work, and maybe you're supporting others on doing that. Well, actually, if you have a deep strength in that area, we sort of see the triangle this way up, which is it's all about the depth in that field of expertise that gives you that strength. But you might, and maybe you want to, have the card this way up, which is that actually you bring this strength out in others. So I'm holding up the activate slide at the moment. So it might be that you not only are very good at self-activation and at getting up in the morning and being able to see what your purpose is, but actually you're very good at bringing that out in others and helping others self-activate, and also keeping everybody else on vision and purpose. So which way are you? Which way, in terms of the peak strength that you exhibit, is it that actually at the moment, if you were thinking about this today, honestly, actually this is what I do, my peak strength helps me in my daily job do what I do, and I feel it gives me, I have great depth in it? Or is it that actually my great strength is that I can bring this out in others? So let's just have a look. Let's do a quick poll. Let's see. Let's see how people identify themselves with their peak strength. So if I can ask for that poll to come up, Mark.
Okay, I'm launching the poll now.
So thinking of my peak strength, do I mostly bring this strength out in others as a leader? Or do I demonstrate depth in this strength in my daily role? Thinking of this, my peak strength that I'd chosen earlier, do I bring this strength out in others as a leader, or do I demonstrate depth in this strength in my daily role? So hopefully we're getting some.
Yep, we've got a good responses coming in.
Yeah. Cool, fantastic. Well, so can you give me, if you could call those out?
Yeah. We're about 45 seconds into the poll. We have 200 and some odd responses, and about 40% say that they bring this strength out in others as a leader, and 60% say they demonstrate depth in the strength in their daily roles.
Fantastic. So I'm going to now, let's just have a look at that. In fact, I'm going to hold that up. There we are. So there we are, very quickly. We are, 60% of us, here we are, yeah, see that in the context of their peak strength, they demonstrate depth. 40% see that they've got leadership competencies, and actually that's something that they're able to bring this out in other people, and that's going to be a key strength of theirs. So again, if you begin to see that when we're pulling a team together and we're drawing together creative teams, that you can begin to see, okay, well, how am I pulling my team together? How am I recruiting people to my team? If I want to make a particular project happen, at which stage am I pulling different people in as people who are actually going to be able to lead certain types of activity and instill the spirit of, for instance, creativity and generation of ideas. And those people who are really going to have great depth in that, because they're going to be very, very good at, for instance, in the creative act of making things and experimenting, but actually they don't necessarily actually either perhaps at that moment want to be in that leadership role. They want to be actually the designer that's making, not necessarily the creative director. So we begin to build a picture. Now, one of the things that happens here is that we build a language. We build a language in a small team, we can build a language in an organization, which gives us the ability to pull together the right team at the right time and have the right conversations about the dynamics in our team so that we can be really effective in driving innovation, in generating ideas and then moving those all the way through into new value. So that's just a very, very quick introduction to the game changer. I mean, what I think I have learned already from the very quick poll we had is that we've quite clearly got an amazing group online today. And I hope that maybe there will be an opportunity in one way or another to actually work and create things together. But it's been that's been a real pleasure to get to know everybody and a little bit through the poll that we did. If you'd like to explore this a little bit further, as I said, Mark, if you bring up that little deck, there we are. If you scan the QR code or you follow those URLs, we've put it together. This was really Arne's question to me was, what could we give away? For us, this is one of the most powerful tools that we use. It sits really at the very heart of how we make innovation happen in organizations. You know, beyond all the methods and the tools of design thinking and design, the people, the culture, and the strengths that they personally bring. So this is a way to explore it as individuals and to explore it in teams. Maybe when we're at home, we can explore it in our families as well. And if you follow those links, you'll be able to download a version and literally stick it together and use it. And I hope that some of you will and that you'll enjoy it. And thank you very much. Excellent.
Thank you, David. I'm just going to read off that the URL so you can scan the QR code, as David said. There's a tiny URL, so you can remember tinyurl.com/SM9J655. That's an easy maybe way to remember it. Or designthinkersacademy.co.uk/game changer. We'll put that. I think it's already been put in the chat by Ezekiel. And I think we have time. We're coming up to the top of the hour. I think we have time for one, maybe two questions. Ezekiel, do you have anything for David?
Yes, David. So since a lot of people are working remote now, is there any advice or thoughts around strengths that you need to look for or bolster in, within a team in a remote situation?
Well, I think one of the key strengths at the moment is resilience generally. And of course, that comes through it across all of the peak strengths that I described. One needs to be able to show great amounts of resilience. I think also now working virtually, we have to change our style and our way of doing things. I mean, even here we're learning, I can see, orchestrating, trying to understand. Normally, when we're working as a team and we're working together, we're sensing what's going on with the people that we're working with. That's a key orchestration strength. So actually we need to use the tools that we've got to pick up on those cues and then quickly be agile and shape and change based on actually what's going on in an online environment. And I would suggest we need to use the tools very, very cleverly to do that. We're now actually running sessions online on how do you run co-creations and design thinking exercises in an online environment. How do you pull together small groups? How do you drive results? And you do need new skills. And but I think the peak strengths, I mean, I think the orchestration strength is really key there because we need to, but in particular, new ways of doing that orchestration.
Great. And I'm gonna just mash up one last question. Somebody was asking about weaknesses And somebody else is asking about if you can use this method to kind of question their strengths or develop new, help somebody develop new skills. So how would you respond to weaknesses, developing new skills? And
so actually all of this is a prompt to understanding our relative strengths and weaknesses. And by digging into how we naturally are, we are all different human beings, we're made up in different ways. So natural strengths come to the surface because that's who we are and what's made us who we are. But we can often find that actually there are key aspects that we want to grow, and then we know that's going to be really helpful. So this little introductory exercise that we created through the Game Changer, it's just a sort of opener for a much deeper conversation, which helps one look at one's strengths and one's weaknesses, and then actually build a plan going forward for how you're going to address that. And some of that might be technique based, because some of that might be actually, I'm really, to really be the person that's going to drive the work during the framing period of my innovation projects, that discovery process. I'm going to have to be better at some of the research techniques myself, not just rely on others. So that might be technique based, but it might also be about one's sensibility as well, and one sort of what you might see as your attitudes and competencies. So yes, this is a way of appraising this, and the way that we would normally support a team or an individual on that journey is that they would do an online diagnostic, so that they'd go really, really deep into this, build a profile, and then work either maybe in their team or facilitated, or on a one-to-one with a coach to really address their goals and accelerate their own development to support their team and to support the organization that they're working for.
Wonderful. Over to you, Mark.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Thanks, Ezekiel. We are on the home stretch. I'm going to really quickly just pop up our host, Arne's name here, and then we're going to jump right back over to Arne, and he can wrap things up. Arne, over to you, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. I want to thank everyone for sticking with us, because it actually is now almost 6, so it's almost 2 hours. Sticking with us and allowing us to learn and how to do these things and make them exciting. And so for me, it has been an extremely useful session. Exciting also to hear all the stories and read all the comments and questions and all that. Again, really weird, but because of not seeing you, so the dynamics is so different. I want to kind of say just 2 things. If you want to read anything, at least, so this is just me personally, my journey towards leadership, creative leadership, design leadership, a new kind of leadership I think we need in this world. I think I just going to leave you with 3 books that have led me kind of onto a path. The first book is called Servant Leadership by Robert Greenleaf, and I'll make sure that you get all the information. Servant Leadership by Robert Greenleaf, first book. I think you should read it. It's not the easiest book to read, but just read the first couple of chapters like I usually do. But then go and read Synchronicity by Joseph Jaworski. Synchronicity being, I think Carl Jung kind of called that the meaningful coincidences. I think that's really important. Everything is connected. And then last but not least, I would read, after that book, I would read Quantum Leadership by Frederick Tsao and Chris Laszlo. Again, because quantum leadership being a kind of leadership that takes care of different things at the same time. It's not just about maximizing profit. It's not just about your company. It is also about your colleagues, your workers. It's their communities. It's the community you're part of. So those 3 books are the books I would recommend if you were interested in leadership. Last but not least book I would recommend for this time is called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb, author of Black Swans. Anti-Fragile, things that gain from disorder. This now, I would suggest, take a look around. Don't just be task orientated. Just don't keep in that flow as we were. If you are at home or everything is disrupted, take a look around. Look at what works. What are the things that work, grow stronger because of the crisis? Those are the things you want to kind of use to rebuild or to change, to kind of keep. What are the things that are not surviving this crisis? What are the fragile things? Those are the things, if you consider this an earthquake, those are the houses you don't want to be rebuilding. So look around in your life, the connection you have, your business, your organization. What are the things that are growing stronger? Those are the things you should focus on. And those are kind of my 2 cents. I really, really want to thank you very much for your attention. We are going to send to all the people registered a link to a recording of the webinar. We will also review all the questions that were sent to us in the Q&A, and we will look at whether we can write up a blog post with those questions. We'll kind of do some affinity mapping with them. We'll send that to you, and all the links to all content that we can kind of gather. We'll send that to you. That's the only email you will receive from us. Then I hope to kind of continue that conversation with you on whatever platform of your choosing. And I think that's it for me. And I would like to leave you, and I think all of us are going to say just quick goodbye. My quick goodbye would be, again, to kind of reiterate, think about what is that thing that you can do for your neighborhood, for the people around you, for, you know, what can you offer, and go ahead and do it. If we all do that, I think we can make a big impact.
Excellent. Thank you, Arne. And I wish I could figure out how to get us all up on the screen at once. It doesn't seem to be obvious for me, but I would like to just thank everyone. Our emails are up on the screen right now. As Arne said, we'll follow up after this with a blog post, and we're going to also send out a survey because we really want to learn from all of you about your experience. And we really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today, and wish you a good day, a good afternoon, or a good evening wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.